السلام علیکم ناظرین، خوش آمدید، خیر مقدم ہے آپ سب کا آج کے ہمارے سیشن میں۔ انشاءاللہ ہم جو ہمارا سلسلہ چل رہا ہے قرآن مجید کا، سورہ نمبر 45 سورہ جاشیہ، آج اس کا دوسرا رکوع شروع کرتے ہیں انشاءاللہ، اور اس کی پہلی 4 آیتیں ہم پڑھ لیتے ہیں۔ سب سے پہلے اس کی تلاوت کر لیں گے۔ اعوذ باللہ من الشیطان الرجیم، بسم اللہ الرحمن الرحیم۔ اللہ الذی سخر لکم البحر لتجری الفلک فیہ بأمرہ ولتبتغوا من فضلہ ولعلکم تشکرون، وسخر لکم ما فی السماوات وما فی الارض جميعا منہ إن في ذلك لآيات لقوم يتفكرون، قل الذين آمنوا يغفروا للذين لا يرجون أيام الله ليجزي قوما بما كانوا يكسبون، من عمل صالحا فلنفسه ومن أساء فعليها ثم إلى ربكم ترجعون۔ صدق اللہ العظیم۔ یہ تھی آیت نمبر 12 to 15۔ انشاءاللہ اس کا ٹرانسلیشن پڑھ لیں گے۔ وہ اللہ ہی تو ہے جس نے تمہارے لیے سمندر کو مسخر کیا تاکہ اس کے حکم سے کشتیاں اس میں چلیں اور تم اس کا فضل تلاش کرو اور شکر گزار رہو۔ اس نے زمین اور آسمانوں کی ساری ہی چیزوں کو تمہارے لیے مسخر کر دیا، سب کچھ اپنے پاس سے، اس میں بڑی نشانیاں ہیں ان لوگوں کے لیے جو غور و فکر کرنے والے ہیں۔ اے نبی صلی اللہ علیہ وسلم، ایمان لانے والوں سے کہہ دو کہ جو لوگ اللہ کی طرف سے برے دن آنے کا کوئی اندیشہ نہیں رکھتے، ان کی حرکتوں پر درگزر سے کام لیں تاکہ اللہ خود ایک گروہ کو اس کی کمائی کا بدلہ دے۔ جو کوئی نیک عمل کرے گا اپنے ہی لیے کرے گا، اور جو برائی کرے گا وہ آپ ہی سے اس کا خمیازہ بھگتے گا، پھر جانا تو سب کو اپنے رب ہی کی طرف ہے۔ یہ تھا ٹرانسلیشن ان آیتوں کا۔ تو انشاءاللہ اس کی تفسیر میں جانے سے قبل ہم تھوڑا سا ریکیپ کر لیتے ہیں کہ ہم نے پہلے رکوع میں کیا پڑھا تھا۔ ہم نے دیکھا کہ اللہ رب العزت نے اس سورہ کے پہلے رکوع میں تمام اپنی نشانیاں، یعنی کہ زمین، سورج، چاند، رات اور دن، اس طرح کے تمام ظاہر ہونے والی، دکھائی دینے والی نشانیوں کو لوگوں کو سامنے بیان کیا تاکہ اس سے لوگ عبرت حاصل کریں۔ اور جو لوگ سمجھدار ہیں، یعنی جنہوں نے اپنے دل میں یہ طے نہ کیا ہے کہ ہم چاہے کتنی بھی سچی بات ہو ہم اس کو انکار کریں گے، تو ایسے لوگ تو اس سے کوئی فائدہ نہیں اٹھائیں گے۔ ہاں، البتہ جو لوگ غفلت میں تھے ان کو اگر ابھی بھی احساس ہوگا تو وہ پلٹ آئیں گے۔ یعنی کہ سلسلہ کلام قریش کے ساتھ، سرداران قریش کے ساتھ تھا، لیکن یہ آج بھی ہمارے لیے وہی سلسلہ کلام ہے، آج بھی لوگوں کی ذہنیت وہی ہے۔ تو انشاءاللہ اللہ تعالیٰ نے جس طرح سے ان کا انجام بتایا تھا، جو لوگ اس چیز کو انکار کر چکے تھے، اللہ تعالیٰ نے کہا تھا ان کو دردناک عذاب دیں گے۔ اور پھر اللہ تعالیٰ نے جو لوگ اس کو مانے تھے، اللہ کے نشانوں کو دیکھ کر اور اللہ کی طرف لپکنے والوں کو، اللہ تعالیٰ نے کہا کہ ان کا بہت ہی اچھا انجام ہوگا۔ تو اسی سلسلہ کلام کا کنٹینیوشن ہے، اس کی تفسیر بھی پڑھ لیتے ہیں۔ وہ اللہ ہی تو ہے جس نے تمہارے لیے سمندر کو مسخر کیا تاکہ اس کے حکم سے کشتیاں اس میں چلیں۔ یعنی مولانا نے اس کی تشریح سورہ بنی اسرائیل، سورہ روم، سورہ لقمان، سورہ مومن، سورہ شورا میں اس میں بڑی ڈیٹیل میں فرمائی تھی کہ اللہ کا نے کس طرح سے سمندر کو انسانوں کے لیے مسخر کیا، اور یہ کشتیاں کس طرح سے ہمارے سفر کے لیے، سامانوں کے لیے کتنی مددگار ہوتی۔ اور تم اس کا فضل تلاش کرو، یعنی سمندر میں تجارت، ماہی گیری، خواصی، جہاز رانی اور دوسرے ذرائع سے رزق حاصل کرنے کی کوشش کرو اور شکر گزار رہو۔ اس نے زمین اور آسمانوں کی ساری ہی چیزوں کو تمہارے لیے مسخر کر دیا، سب کچھ اپنے پاس سے۔ اس فقرے کے دو مطلب ہیں، ایک یہ کہ اللہ کا یہ عطیہ دنیا کے بادشاہوں کا سا عطیہ نہیں ہے جو ریت سے حاصل کیا ہوا مال ریت ہی میں سے کچھ لوگوں کو بخش دیتے ہیں، بلکہ کائنات کی ساری نعمتیں اللہ کی اپنی پیدا کردہ ہیں اور اس نے اپنی طرف سے یہ انسان کو عطا فرمائی ہیں۔ دوسرے یہ کہ نہ ان کی نعمتوں کے پیدا کرنے میں کوئی اللہ کا شریک، نہ انہیں انسان کے لیے مسخر کرنے میں کسی اور ہستی کا کوئی دخل، تنہا اللہ ہی ان کا خالق بھی ہے اور اسی نے اپنی طرف سے وہ انسان کو عطا کی ہے۔ इसमें बड़ी निशानियां हैं इन लोगों के लिए जो गौर व फिक्र करने वाले हैं। यानी इस तस्खीर में और इन चीज़ों को इंसान के लिए नाफे बनाने में गौर व फिक्र करने वालों के लिए बड़ी निशानियां हैं। ये निशानियां इस हकीकत की तरफ खुला खुला इशारा कर रही हैं कि ज़मीन से लेकर आसमानों तक कायनात की तमाम अशिया और क़ुव्वतों का खालिक व मालिक और मुदब्बिर व मुंतज़िम एक ही खुदा है, जिसने इनको एक कानून का ताबे बना रखा है, और वही खुदा इंसान का रब है, जिसने अपनी कुदरत और हिकमत और रहमत से इन तमाम अशिया और वक्तों को इंसान की ज़िंदगी, इसकी मईशियत, इसकी आसाइश, इसकी तरक्की और इसकी तहज़ीब व तमद्दुन के लिए साज़गार बना दिया। और तन्हा वही खुदा इंसान की उबूदियत और शुक्रगुज़ारी और नियाज़मंदी का मुस्तहिक़ है, ना कि कुछ दूसरी हस्तियाँ जिनका ना इन अशिया और क़ुव्वतों के पैदा करने में कोई हिस्सा हो, ना इन्हें इंसान के लिए मुसख्खर करने और नाफ़े बनाने में कोई दख़ल। ऐ नबी सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम, ईमान लाने वालों से कह दो कि जो लोग अल्लाह की तरफ से बुरे दिन आने का कोई अंदेशा नहीं रखते, असल अल्फाज हैं अल्लज़ीना ला यरजून अय्याम अल्लाह। लफ्ज़ी तर्जुमा ये हुआ कि जो लोग अल्लाह के दिनों की तवक्को नहीं रखते, लेकिन अरबी मुहावरे में ऐसे मौके पर अय्याम से मुराद महज दिन नहीं बल्कि वो यादगार दिन होते हैं जिनमें अहम तारीख़ी वाक़यात पेश आए हुए हैं। मसलन अय्यामुल अरब का लफ्ज़ तारीख़ अरब के अहम वाक़यात और क़बाइल अरब की इन बड़ी-बड़ी लड़ाइयों के लिए बोला जाता है, जिन्हें बाद की नस्लें सदियों तक याद करती रही हैं। यहाँ अय्यामुल्लाह से मुराद किसी कौम के वो बुरे दिन हैं जब अल्लाह का गज़ब इस पर टूट पड़े और अपने करतूतों की पादाश में वो तबाह करके रख दी जाए। इसी माने के लिहाज से हमने इस फ़िक्रे का तर्जुमा ये किया है कि जो लोग अल्लाह की तरफ से बुरे दिन आने का कोई अंदेशा नहीं रखते, यानी जिनको ये ख़्याल नहीं है कि कभी वो दिन भी आएगा जो हमारे इन अफ़आल पर हमारी शामत आएगी, और इसी गफ़लत ने इनको ज़ुल्म व सितम पर दिलेर कर दिया है। इनकी हरकतों पर दरगुज़र से काम लें ताकि अल्लाह खुद एक ग्रोह को इसकी कमाई का बदला दे। मुफस्सिरीन ने इस आयत के दो मतलब बयान किए हैं और आयत के अल्फाज में दोनों मानों की गुंजाइश है। एक ये कि अहले ईमान इस जालिम ग्रोह की ज़्यादतों पर दरगुज़र से काम ले ताकि अल्लाह इनको अपनी तरफ से इनके सब्र व हलम और इनकी शराफत की जज़ा दे, और राह खुदा में जो अज़ियतें इन्होंने बर्दाश्त की हैं, इनका अजर अता फ़रमाए। दूसरा मतलब यह है कि अहले ईमान इस ग्रोह से दरगुज़र करें ताकि अल्लाह खुद इसकी ज़ियादतों का बदला इसे दे। बास मुफस्सिरीन ने इस आयत को मनसूख करार दिया है। वो कहते हैं कि ये हुक्म इस वक़्त तक था जब तक मुसलमानों को जंग की इजाज़त ना दी गई थी। फिर जब इसकी इजाज़त आ गई तो ये हुक्म मनसूख हो गया, लेकिन आयत के अल्फाज पर गौर करने से साफ मालूम होता है कि नस्ख का ये दावा दुरुस्त नहीं है। दरगुज़र का लफ्ज़ इसी मायने में कभी नहीं बोला जाता कि जब आदमी किसी की ज़्यादतियों का बदला लेने पर क़ादिर ना हो तो इससे दरगुज़र करे, बल्कि इस मौके पर सब्र, तहम्मुल और बर्दाश्त के अल्फाज इस्तेमाल किए जाते हैं। इन अल्फाज को छोड़कर जब यहाँ दरगुज़र का लफ्ज़ इस्तेमाल किया गया है तो इससे खुद ब खुद ये मफ़हूम निकलता है कि अहले ईमान इंतकाम की कुदरत रखने के बावजूद इन लोगों की ज़्यादतियों का जवाब देने से परहेज़ करें, जिन्हें खुदा से बेखौफी ने अखलाक व आदमियत की हदें तोड़ डालने पर जरी कर दिया। इस हुक्म का कोई तारुज़ इन आयत से नहीं है जिनमें मुसलमानों को जंग की इजाज़त दी गई है। जंग की इजाज़त का ताल्लुक इस हालत से है जब मुसलमानों की हुकूमत किसी काफ़िर कौम के खिलाफ बाकायदा कार्रवाई करने की कोई माक़ूल वजह पाए, और अफ़ू व दरगुज़र का हुक्म इन आम हालात के लिए है जिनमें अहले ईमान को खुदा से बेखौफ लोगों के साथ किसी न किसी तरह से साबिक़ा पेश आए, और वो इन्हें अपनी ज़बान व कलम और अपने बर्ताव से तरह-तरह की अज़ियतें दें। इस हुक्म का मकसूद यह है कि मुसलमान अपने मुकाम में बुलंद से नीचे उतरकर इन पस्त अखलाक लोगों से उलझने और झगड़ने और इनकी हर बेहूदगी का जवाब देने पर ना उतर आए। जब तक शराफत और माखिलियत के साथ किसी इल्ज़ाम या एतराज़ को जवाब देना है या किसी ज़्यादती की मुदाफ़ित करना मुमकिन हो, इससे परहेज़ ना किया जाए। मगर जहाँ बात इन हुदूद से गुज़रती नज़र आए, वहाँ चुप साध ली जाए और मामला अल्लाह के सुपुर्द कर दिया जाए। मुसलमान इनसे खुद उलझेंगे तो अल्लाह इनसे निमटने के लिए इन्हें इनके हाल पर छोड़ देगा। दरगुजर से काम लेंगे तो अल्लाह खुद जालिमों से निपटेगा और मजलूमों को इनके तहम्मुल का अजर अता फरमाएगा। जो कोई नेक अमल करेगा अपने ही लिए करेगा, और जो बुराई करेगा वो आप ही इसका खुमियाजा भुगतेगा। फिर जाना तो सबको अपने रब ही की तरफ है। तो ये थी तफसीर आज की इन 4 आयतों की। तो इंशाअल्लाह सिलसिला कलाम तो इसी मौजू पर रहेगा। ये बकिया आयतें इसकी जो रुकू नंबर 2 की है, वो कल फिर हम लेके हाज़िर होते हैं। जज़ाकल्लाह।
जज़ाकल्लाह खैर निज़ाम भाई, बहुत
बारकल्लाह फीक।
शुक्रिया। इंशाअल्लाह कल जो है फिर बक़िया मकान में
हुँ,
तफ़सीर हदीस की भी सुनेंगे। जज़ाकल्लाह खैर।
इंशाअल्लाह, बारकल्लाह,
चलो
अस्सलाम
इंशाअल्लाह
वालेकुम।
मुलाकात होगी। वालेकुम अस्सलाम। Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hope everyone is doing well. It's another Friday, the 16th of October in 2020. And slowly but surely, we are moving towards the end of 2020. Another quite a different year, as we've been discussing for quite some time now, of how this year has been nothing like before, and probably something that we will have nothing like ever after. Obviously, the big major story that's hitting every single platform globally, it's hitting anywhere and everywhere, is obviously around coronavirus and how coronavirus has impacted the lives, it has impacted the way we work, it has impacted every single element that we have across within our society in some way or form, whether it's the social healthcare system, whether it's the working of people virtually, or if it is down to the hospitality of restaurants, any other segment that you can pick on has obviously been highly and badly impacted by this coronavirus situation. And hence, I think some of the more recent news items that are obviously coming out on the back of it is something many of you might have seen reported a bit earlier today, that even within UK, where the tiering system was introduced, tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3, around coronavirus lockdown, there are still localized restrictions that many of the governments, like in Scotland and Wales and Northern Ireland, can announce. We all know that Northern Ireland has gone into a proper lockdown. I think they're calling it a 2-week circuit breaker, just to bring the number of cases down. And as you can see, Wales has also announced that anyone visiting from coronavirus hotspot within England or Scotland won't be able to enter Wales anymore. So any place that is either on tier 2 or tier 3 within England or Scotland, anyone traveling from there won't be able to go into Wales or have any kind of vacation planned or any activity on the back of it. And it's really important in that sense that midterm is coming into UK, where the schools will be off, children will be off for a while again, and many might have been planning to travel into Wales for holidays and everything else in that domain. So that again won't be happening anytime soon. Moving beyond, obviously, the coronavirus impact, this October-November timing is obviously always very much the timing of elections in many countries. And one key election battle that is happening in this year, actually, people are going to the voting booths on Saturday, is the election in New Zealand. And many of you might have been well aware of Jacinda Ardern, who's been the Prime Minister for the last 3 years in New Zealand. And she's a very, very popular Prime Minister of New Zealand because of her handling of the Christchurch situation. She was obviously the only second Prime Minister in any country globally who had a baby while she was in the office with her husband, who's a TV star. After Benazir Bhutto. Benazir Bhutto was the first prime minister in office to have a young baby born during her premiership. But she obviously been very famous in taking her baby across in UN and on the campaign rally. But obviously her popularity really hit the global levels when she tackled the Christchurch attacks on the mosques back in 2018, where 51 people were killed and martyred by a white supremacist who was jailed for life just a few weeks earlier in the courts in New Zealand. And her leadership, her reaching out to the community of Muslim descendants and Muslim background, really put her on the global map. And I think there have been more recent challenges that the government in New Zealand has been facing. A big volcano went burst, and then obviously coronavirus struck New Zealand earlier this year, when New Zealand being reported as one of the first countries that went into a lockdown. And technically, Jacinda Ardern announced that they have defeated coronavirus with no virus cases coming in for quite a while. So it will be an interesting election, as obviously she is expected to win quite easily, but you never know in any elections. I think that's one of the things about elections. You can never say who's actually going to win. Walaikum assalam. Idris Saab is online, I can say. Jazakallah khair for watching, and Muhammad Arif Chauhan Saab, I can see he's online as well. Jazakallah khair for watching, and hope every one of you is doing well. I think over on the other side, more obviously closer to Europe, has been a very interesting story about the president of France, the ex-president of France, Nicolas Sarkozy, was actually being charged with criminal conspiracy. And people from Asian backgrounds might be well aware of prime ministers and presidents getting charged with different cases of conspiracy and corruption. But this is quite a big story in France, that the ex-president has been actually charged with criminal conspiracy on the back of the issue that he actually took cash from Libyan regime, Gaddafi and other people back in 2007 to fund his presidential campaign. So this is a big story in essence, that he was ex-president of France, and he's been charged as a member of a criminal conspiracy, as it's been called, that he has been taking a lot of bribes and cash from Libyan regimes and Libyan people in general back in 2007 to fund his election campaign. So this is going to be quite an interesting, in essence, issue for quite a while, to see if France actually really goes out, charges the president, and gives some sort of a punishment on the back of it as well. So this is quite a big story in France happening at the moment, and people are quite concerned on where and which shape it takes on, and what the end result of this might be. In Asia, over in Thailand, I think there's quite a major protest movement happening at the moment, as many of you might have been following these stories coming out from Thailand as well, that there are major protests happening against the government, or the current monarchy in Thailand, and people are demanding that there should be elections happening in Thailand, and democracy should be further strengthened in the country. So there are major protests happening, and although government banned on the protest, they've been tackling with the protests with water cannons and all the police tactics that are used to steer away crowds. But the protesters are still not going away, and there's a major battle on the streets of Bangkok at the moment happening, where the government and the police is trying to get people away from protesting with water cannons and everything else. But as you can see on your screens as well, that they are actively using umbrellas and all that sort of stuff to fight against the water cannons and still continue with their protest. So this is again quite a major protest movement happening in Thailand at the moment, and people are expected to increase in numbers and increase in the protest over the coming weeks as well, which is going to create a bit of a interesting view of how things happen and go forward from here at this point onwards. Over far east in Japan, I think quite an interesting element is happening at the moment. Many of you might have remembered the tsunami that took over back in 2007, I think, and it was 2007-8 time period, and it was a massive destruction that happened in places like in Japan, in Sri Lanka, in some of the Pacific Islands, and all the areas in that domain after the earthquake. And one of the major things affected by tsunami was the nuclear power plant in Japan, in Fukushima. As many of you might remember, the nuclear disaster that happened in Fukushima. So what Japan has been doing is that everything that was done to cater the radioactivity from that nuclear plant, that water has been stored in some storage tanks since then. And now the capacity is running out. So Japan is going to be releasing all that radioactive treating water back into the sea. So this is quite a controversial issue at the moment. Many people are saying that it is going to happen, and it is going to create a major impact on the sea and the fishing and all the other things, as you would imagine, all the other things that are included within that ocean ecosystem. But Japan and some of the scientists are saying that releasing that water that basically treated the nuclear disaster is not going to create a massive impact. So releasing that water into the sea is hopefully not going to create too many issues for the life and the ecosystem of fishes and everything else in that domain. Walaikum assalam. Rizwan Akbar Sahab is watching. Jazakallah khair as well. So let's see how this thing shapes up. One of the, I think, the saddest stories that obviously happened earlier this year was the attack in Afghanistan on the maternity hospital. As many of you might remember, that there was an attack on a maternity hospital, and many new mothers and children who were literally born on that day were pretty much martyred in this attack. But obviously, good things often happen, and there was this Amina who was only 1 hour old when the attack happened, and you can see her on the screens as well. And she was quite badly injured in that attack, but now she is recovering. I think she is getting back on her feet. She is about 7 months old now, and obviously it was a sad day for Amina. She lost her mom as well, and the father, as you can see on the screen as well. But she was the youngest person ever recorded to have been shot by a gunfire battle of this record. She was only 2 hours old at that time, but now she is recovering, and she is hopefully soon, inshallah, going to be starting walking again as well. So it's been reported globally, and she's obviously seen as a symbol of recovery of Afghanistan in some manner as well, and the resilience of the country and the people in Afghanistan. That she was only 1.5 hours old and still got shot, but still recovering, and inshallah she'll be back soon on her feet and walking properly in the future as well. More, I think one of the major things happening in Middle East is obviously many of you might have been following this war that has been breaking out in Yemen for quite a while between the Houthis and the government and what are known as the Houthi rebels in there. But things seems to be improving finally in Yemen as well. There was a recent agreement signed between the rebels and the government forces in Switzerland and in Stockholm, actually. And on the back of this agreement and the peace treaty that was signed, there has been a swapping and releasing a number of prisoners of war for quite some time. More than 400 prisoners have been released by both sides as a sign that things are hopefully going to improve in Yemen, finally, after years of fighting. And both sides are going to be coming to the table to speak to each other and then hopefully see a lot of normality returning back to Yemen at some point as well. So you can see on your screen the prisoners that have been on each side for quite a long time now. They've been started to be released now, and United Nations, the ICRC, the International Committee of Red Cross, and some of the other people are expecting that up to 700 people will be freed during this operation of prisoner swapping. And hopefully, inshallah, things start to improve and slightly get back to normality in Yemen at some point as well. So this is, again, Walaikum Salam, Rana Sarfraz Sahab is watching as well. Jazakallah khair for watching. So we hope that with this prisoner swapping and people coming back and speaking on different elements of how things can be brought back to some degree of normality, that we see things as improving in Yemen as well. I think on the across the pond in United States, obviously elections is the biggest topic at the moment. And interestingly, the pre-polls have already started in United States. Obviously, 3rd November is the actual voting date for the presidential election, but in many areas, it is always staggered in US. There isn't like just one day of elections as such. They start elections with pre-polling in some states and areas so that it can be eased out, and then it can be completed by 3rd of November as the final polls, and then the result comes out on the 4th of November. But this time around, it is so far seen that it's been highly concentrated in terms of people turning out to vote. It's never been seen previously. The number of voters in the line, the people who have really started to come out, this has never been seen before, as been reported by different news agencies, that the people who are coming out to vote are really, really in their long queues. There are hundreds and hundreds of people. You can already see this queue that's actually out in Florida area. So many people have already started to queue for very long time and long hours, even before the poll started, to cast their early ballots within the US election. So this is going to be a really, really interesting election, as many of you might be well aware of it, with Donald Trump and Joe Biden standing against each other. But with this level of voter turnout, the expectation is that it is going to be a very close call on who actually wins the election at the end of the day. It's probably going to be on the knife edge. And as ever in the US elections, the swing states, or the states with the highest electoral votes, Florida and some of the other ones, are going to play a critical role on who actually wins at the end of the day. So this again is an ongoing thing. It's going to be obviously interesting in how and see where it goes on from here. More closer to home, and this is something I think this has becoming a much more a reality of times that we live in, that the technology that secures our data, and while we are using WhatsApp and Facebook and Instagram and everything else in that domain, whenever any organization or corporation loses sight on the security of the data, it's becoming a major issue. British Airways today were fined 20 million over leakage of data from their systems, the Information Commissioner's Office, ICO. They said that it was back in 2018 that personal data of so many of British Airways clients and flyers was actually released online, and many people were exposed with all their data available to hackers and all that sort of stuff. So ICO has actually fined 20 million, which is the single largest fine ever conducted because of a data breach. So it's a very strong reminder of any organization that records or maintains data of anyone individually, that this is going to become a major issue globally, not just in UK, but globally the fines are going to be massive. So any organization, charities, or any other form of firm which stores personal people data is going to become a lot more in the spotlight. And I think the last bit, in a way, just on a very high level, is obviously one of the big things happening last week was Apple released its iPhone 12, which is the latest in the iPhone release. And as many of you are well aware, that iPhone is one of the top selling smartphone brands in the world, probably if not the topmost brand in the world. But this time, just this Apple iPhone 12 has a very unique chip that's been developed and embedded into it. And this chip that is generated by a machine that costs around 100 million, 123 million, is one of the first chips in the world that will enable people to have literally the capacity of a whole data room into their mobile phones. So it will be something that will allow people to edit video clips, play games in a more graphically intensive oriented manner, while using very less on the battery power, because Apple has been obviously always been very bad on the battery life of the Apple iPhones. So this new chip, it's probably going to redefine in some way or form how mobile phones are built over the number of years. And this is going to be quite interesting on how the other organization and mobile phone brands start using this new chip that is going to make smartphones a bit more faster, a bit more lighter and longer in their battery lives as well, as because the chip is going to be using UV light to create all the data on the plasma in the way it's stored. So this A14 chip is this A14 Bionic chip that's been kind of integrated into the Apple 12 phones is certainly going to be something really different for the smartphones technology that we have been pretty much using for the last many years. So this again, I think, was quite a new thing that was introduced by Apple quite recently. So that was kind of bit of an overview of a few things that are happening around the world in Yemen, New Zealand, United States, Middle East, in Afghanistan, in obviously United States election orientation, in UK around coronavirus and all the situations. So hopefully we inshallah continue with these discussions in the coming weeks. And as we hear more about updates as we go through more weeks, we'll inshallah keep sharing them as well. So Jazakallah khair for watching, and we'll inshallah continue with this from tomorrow, 7 p.m. in UK. You will hear about the panel discussion with the brothers speaking about the concept of worship. And then Sunday, obviously, it will be the special one around the marriages and matchmaking. So please do watch, and inshallah, we'll see you soon. Jazakallah khair.